But as I said, he's certainly not alone in this. Of course, in 1948, the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc countries, in 1947 rather, they voted for partition in the UN. Without their support, there would not have been a Jewish state established in Palestine. In 1948, in the war, arms shipments from Czechoslovakia and other Soviet bloc states were absolutely essential in helping the Zionists win the military struggle. Often said that without them they wouldn't have done that. Broadly, the Zionist project enjoyed the support of the Western left. And I stress the Western left, because if you go to the global left outside the West, from the 30s on, in India, for example, the anti-colonial movement does not support a Jewish state because it correctly sees that as an extension of Western domination in the Middle East. And so Gandhi and Nehru, who were certainly not anti-Semites, remotely, and who were intensely aware of that the Holocaust was going on in Europe, were intensely aware that the Jews were being treated barbarously by Europeans, but said that this could not justify treating yet another people barbarously. This could not justify taking away from the people of Palestine the land that they had always lived in. But those voices are not heard in the West. And as I said, in 1948, the Communist Party and the Labour left in this country supported Zionism wholeheartedly. In 1944, at the British Labour Party conference that year, there was a motion which called not only for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, but specifically for that to be facilitated by the forced transfer of the entire indigenous population to neighboring countries. And this passed without a single vote against, without a single voice questioning, well, what about the rights of those people who are already there? Now, the person who drew up this resolution was Hugh Dalton, who I can assure you was not Jewish. He was an old Etonian, upper-class sort of guy who ultimately became a very significant figure in Attlee's post-war government. And in drawing this resolution, he was pretty much doing what upper-class Englishmen, including those in the Labour movement, had been doing unselfconsciously for many decades. He was drawing lines on a map and disposing of whole populations without reference to those populations. That seemed perfectly natural to Hugh Dalton and to a lot of other people in Britain and America, because that's what they've been doing in Asia and Africa for decades. Why not continue to do it in the Middle East? But I do want to stress that these things are not about Jewish influence. Hugh Dalton couldn't have cared less about the Jewish vote in East London. It meant nothing to him. And the Jewish vote in East London at that time was not totally absorbed by and dedicated to the establishment of the Jewish state. So it's not about what's these days called, I think erroneously called, Jewish power. It's about something very different that happens on the British and American left in the wake of the Holocaust. And that's two things come together. One is an entirely understandable solidarity with the victims of fascism, but that coalesces with assumptions of Western prerogatives to make and break borders and peoples across the developing world. And these two things come together silently. They merge without comment, if you like, to shape the Western attitude toward the Jewish state. And this, I think, has always been the Zionist trump card. And you can see it even in my grandfather, who considered himself such an anti-imperialist, is the way that Zionism so neatly dovetails with the rarely examined assumptions of Western supremacy. Our right as white people, as Westerners, to determine the fates of millions, hundreds of millions, billions around the world, and which underlies our involvement in the current occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as our support of Israel in the Middle East. I finally want to bring the story up to date, as it were, or finish with the last thing, because having told my grandfather's story, a fair amount of the book is also about my story. And, I came to be an anti-Zionist Jew, like most people in my situation, kind of gradually and piecemeal. It's not something that I rushed into, and I can tell you that for most Jews, coming out as a critic of Israel, no less as an opponent of the Jewish state, which I am, it's not easy. It always leads to traumatic episodes in the family and with friends, and it isn't at all pleasant to be decried as a traitor to your people by those who claim to speak for people. On the other hand, I have to say that I have become inured to this. I have lived with this since, as you'll hear in a moment, since I was 14, and I just don't take it seriously anymore. And every time I hear it, I know that these are people who do not want to engage in the argument about human justice. Human justice has no ethnic qualification. And it's people who don't want to engage in the argument on those terms who throw the self-hating allegation at people like Mik.